Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Mechanics You Never Knew Existed or may have at least forgotten. We're going to be starting off with the Galactic Legend, the newest one, Leia Organa. A couple things. One thing on her basic I want to talk about, or maybe her basic as a whole, and then just how her team ramps damage so crazy high, and it might work a little bit differently than you expect. So the main thing I wanted to point out on her basic is it is basically a special on her turn, and whether you're using her on offense or trying to take her down on defense, you need to be aware of what's going to happen based on who you attack. So when she attacks on a turn, it's still pretty good. I mean, it's good damage, and you get retribution on everyone for 2 turns, so it's pretty crazy. She's also doing true damage on her turn, and the biggest thing, I've talked about it a lot before, especially last 5v5 season, because I was relying on JML to beat Leia. If she uses a basic on her turn against a healer and support, she dispels all debuffs on all allies. I mean, that's just amazing anyway. That's like a special. But she equalizes her health and protection with the weakest other rebel ally. So if you're doing the approach of JML, trying to just go all in on Leia and take her down from top to bottom before anyone else, she can completely erase any progress. You've left R2-D2 or Drogan or someone up at full health and protection. She basics one of your supports if you brought one, like Hermit Yoda or Jolie, and then she goes all the way back up, and then it's a very crushing feeling because you got out the gate, you did a lot of damage, and then it's all gone. So when I take JML versus Leia, I don't bring any supports. I like Mace Windu because he dispels the stealth from the team. R2 puts up, and that's really very nice. But you could use others. Plo Koon is used by some. Just try to have a tank or an attacker in there. Tanks do get a full mass assist on them from the basics, so that is still intimidating. Probably the best is an attacker because she just dispels buffs on them and gives them, reduces their speed by 5, well, per buff. It's a very powerful basic. This is like probably the best basic in the game at this point. Just ridiculous. But yeah, so just keep an eye out. Be careful what type of character you bring in. Also, the way she ramps damage, there's a couple things going on. There's mastery gain. So whenever enemies attack out of turn, which kind of happens a lot now, non-scoundrel rebel allies, so think not Han and Chewie, gain 1% mastery until the end of the encounter. So that is some ramping. All this other stuff is not about damage or mastery. Masteries only get increased damage from characters that have damage as a mastery, which is not Leia. She's a tank and does not have extra damage, so she's not ramping her own damage that way. But like Drogan and even R2 has damage in the mastery, so that gets up there. Another big thing, and this is probably the biggest thing because it helps even Han and Chewie, whenever an enemy's turn ends while Leia has Fearless, she gains max health. Enemies also lose 5% mastery and 15% defense and tenacity until the end of the encounter. And this is just a stacking effect. Think about how that extra defense level 6 Datacron is working. It totals to 200%, but it seems to be a way bigger impact than if you have just 200% on a Datacron because it is a compounding interest type deal. So Han and Chewie are benefiting from that. They're ramping up from that too. If the enemy is a tank and they have like armor or protection or something, especially armor, and they're losing mastery, that's going to help you hit even harder. And then the last kind of mastery ramping, there's like 3 different things. Whenever she has Fearless at the end of her turn, non-scoundrel rebel allies, so just like Drogan and R2, that's why Drogan ramps so much more than Han and Chewie. They gain 5% mastery until the end of the encounter, and she's getting ultimate charge. So there's a lot of things that play into how she ramps so crazy high that you might not know about, and I have to brush up on it for myself. So just keep in mind all that when you're facing her or using her. And where there's Leia, there's also Drogan. He has a significantly simpler kit, but he hits for an insane amount of damage. It's just crazy. I've seen him hit like over 500,000 on a basic. So what I want to talk about is mainly how you choose between his basic and specials and how his unique interacts with them. I bring this up because it's getting really popular, CLS lead with Drogan. The basic can be evaded if the leader is not a tank, which CLS is not a tank. But that's just one little tidbit that people probably are overlooking. It's not a huge thing, but you can get dodged. There's a lot of force out there. But when he has his turn meter removed, he gains 60% offense for 1 turn. So that can work a couple ways. So like say you're in a mirror and then Han shoots him and reduces his turn meter, or you're using Inquisitors and you reduce his turn meter. That's buffing him up too. Leia also removes his turn meter on purpose to manipulate this mechanic. It only happens once, so it's like if she did it and then he gets his turn meter removed by someone else, it doesn't really matter. But also, the first time each encounter he uses coordinated shot on his turn, deals 75% more damage. So you can actually do more damage, I believe, with the basic than with his special fire support. And I actually prefer to do fire support last. Like if I need to get a really big hit in, coordinated shot, it's going to be amazing. Or you can just save it until he's ramped up his mastery. And then if you use this special, then fire support, and then the basic, he's ramped up a lot. And that's when you start seeing like 500,000 damage. Only on his turn though. But another thing in his unique to keep in mind is Keen Stratagem. It's his unique buff. He always assists someone with Keen Stratagem when they use an ability during their turn. And you have the ability to pass it out, like with Battle Plan. So a great opening move if you're using them on offense might be just to use Battle Plan, get Keen Stratagem spread out. So he's assisting all the time. That might end up being more damage in the end, rather than using your big basic right away or even fire support. So I'd probably go Battle Plan first, fire support, and then coordinated shot once you've really ramped up. So that's not too much about Drogan, but hopefully there's something there that you learned. Next up, we're talking about Baze Malbus, a character that I took far too long to get up and running. I now have him at Relic 5, but for the longest time I didn't use him. He wasn't required for anything. He's not even required for profundity. But he's fantastic either on that Leia team or especially on a Rogue One team for several reasons. One, the big thing, and this is for people that might be like me or newer, weren't around for the Chase craze, and which was Chirrut and Baze in every team. Weren't around for that. You don't realize what this guy does. He is a turn meter machine. He gains 5% turn meter whenever an enemy gains a buff, and this was designed a long time ago when buffs weren't even that prevalent. I don't think Bastila was in the game giving tons of buffs out. Like, it seems like every character now gives so many buffs to the entire team, so he's constantly going to be cycling through his teams, and he's a buff dispelling machine too. Like, if there's a team with a ton of buffs, Baze is your guy, which is like pretty much all the time. Like, he messes up my JML team against Leia. He has an even harder time against Baze than like Han and Chewie because he is constantly taking turns. You really want to daze him. His second special dispels all buffs on a single target and flips them. So if they have like offense up, they get offense down. And the AoE dispels buffs on all enemies, which is awesome. And then also 25% bonus damage to Empire enemies and enemies who were not buffed. So I actually didn't even realize that. Someone commented on, so thank you. I usually like to save it for the buff dispel, but if you're facing like Imperial Remnant, which is why he is a huge factor in countering that new Dark Trooper Moff Gideon team, getting rid of all those buffs, extra damage, tons of turn meter, really helps juice up Radis because he gets to his ultimate hope ability sooner. So this guy is just fantastic, and he's worth taking a look at, even though he's not required for anything. Next, I'm going to be talking about a couple Bad Batch characters, starting with Wrecker, because they're going to be pretty focused. They're going to be a new focus in my new free-to-play farming guide for 2024, mainly because of this thing, but more on that in another video. So for Wrecker, I just want to, I don't know, persuade newer players of how this team is very valuable. I talked about Hunter in an older video, but Wrecker is an amazing tank. He gains tons of max health and max protection, plus 20% for each other Bad Batch ally. So in 3v3, that's plus 40%. At 5v5, at least like 60%. If you have Omega, at plus 80%, although you might want to skip Omega. And he's also helping heal his allies. With that first special, he heals all allies with equal to 5% of his max protection, so that's going to include those stat boosts he gets from the unique. To mod him for full protection, don't do defense primaries or health primaries, but I give him as much protection as you can. I like defense sets because you can't have protection sets, so defense is the best for survivability. And then when he's furious, which is a little number above his head, he gets 1 stack at the beginning for each clone trooper and Bad Batch ally, which stacks, so it's like 6 in 3v3. If you have Omega in 5v5, you start with 10. But if he has that Furious ability, plus 20% of his max health, and all allies gain 10% turn meter for each character who is stealth. And I think that's just across the whole board. So if you're facing an enemy team that has stealth, this is part of why they're so good against General Grievous too, because that team throws out a lot of stealth. So you're helping juice up your turn meter, run circles around them. So that's a great counter in early game or even end game, as long as they don't have like BB-8 in there. It makes it a lot harder. He's just a great character, great tank. Don't underestimate his tankiness. Next Bad Batch character we're talking about is Tech, mainly his unique. And one thing is you really want Echo to go before Tech, and most people will just load up their Echo with speed and it's plenty, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're going for like Echo goes and then Tech goes immediately after, you want them really close, you gotta be careful because he gains +1 speed for each clone trooper ally, double for Bad Batch allies at the beginning of the battle. So that's at least 6 in a 3v3, up to 10 in 5v5, so just keep that in mind when calculating your speeds. It's easy to miss. It's small, but with speed, every single point counts. And then I just wanted to talk about how the translation mechanic works. Someone commented, this is more for newer players, someone commented on an old video, or not too old, kind of recent, saying I was wrong about how translation works, that you're not decreasing cooldowns by like the translation giver's basic, but the one that has the translation. Oh, it was my like CLS mechanics video. So when you have Tech on the team, just keep an eye out if people have 3 stacks of translation. If they do, use any assist calls, which is mainly just Echo, Bad Batch Echo, to call Tech. He's going to reduce the cooldowns when he does the basic. It gets some nice stuff in there. It's not a huge damage dealer, but reducing your own cooldowns is a massive benefit, especially because you got stuff like a turn meter swap on Hunter, you got the mass stun on Wrecker, you got the mass dispel on Echo. Just a fantastic mechanic. He was actually the second character to have translation added to his kit, so you just keep that in mind if you're new to the Bad Batch team. And the last character we're going to be talking about today is Captain Rex, who is just a wrecking ball of character. Brand new this year, made the Phoenix team go from a laughingstock to a complete dynamo of a team, especially on offense. True 0 to hero turnaround. So for newer players, like, you're going to want to understand his kit and how it actually works, why you actually care about him so much. One, he's inflicting tenacity down and daze on all enemies, which is amazing. Tenacity down means debuffs will land if possible, which means an 85% chance, and you don't care about your own potency. He's giving out turn meter like that. But the biggest thing about him is his unique. Most people are familiar with Phoenix. Some newer players are not. But with Phoenix, you have Hera as the lead, and she is letting all Phoenix allies share their abilities to each other. So anytime, their unique abilities. So anytime you read Rex in his unique on the Phoenix team, interpret that as every Phoenix member. So like Captain Rex gains crit chance, health, speed, and tenacity. The whole team gets that. So even in 3v3, when his people are fixated on the Omicron, Omicron works for clones in 3v3, Phoenix in 5v5. Even in 3v3 Grand Arena, he is still sharing all those stats, which is fantastic. And whenever any other Phoenix ally uses a special ability, he assists, dealing 40% less damage. So that doesn't mean that like when he uses a special ability, people don't assist. It's just only the ability user is not assisting. So like on anyone's turn, it's a mass swarm, it's a mass assist. And you're also going to have Chopper in there on his basic, can reduce cooldown, so you're always getting specials. But another thing I think even endgame players are missing is whenever an ally is inflicted with a debuff, he gains 5% turn meter per debuff and then recovers health and protection. So that means everyone is gaining 5% turn meter, and that is one of the specific reasons why this team is good against Lord Vader. Now without a Datacron propping him up, it's only really going to work in Grand Arena because you're dispelling days all the time. But Lord Vader, teams that just inflict a lot of debuffs, Phoenix are going to do fantastic against. One, you got this turn meter gain, you got Kanan giving people extra health from getting debuffed. So just think like Empire, like Palpatine Empire, you really need to get out ahead to win. So this guy just needs to be fastest, get him out the gate running, give turn meter to everyone. I have a lot of speed on him. But debuff heavy teams, even if it's not something you see on a video or something, just think what has heavy debuffs. It might not have and doesn't have like days or shock that they're going to get out on me. That's a team that is right for the picking to take down with Phoenix, with Captain Rex. And last mechanic we're discussing is an interaction between two ships, TIE Advanced and TIE Interceptor. Endgame players and probably most mid-game players know how this actually works. But for the longest time, I was confused because I knew I got a turn 1 reinforcement when I had TIE Interceptor and reinforcements, but it's not anywhere on TIE Interceptor's kit. You're not going to find it there. Instead, it is in Darth Vader's kit, so you need to start Darth Vader in the starting lineup and have a TIE Interceptor and reinforcements, because there's a specific call out that got reworked when TIE Interceptor came into the game. But all allies, like on the field, out in space, and in reinforcements, have to be either Empire, Inquisitors, or Sith. And then you're going to reduce the all ship cooldowns by 1. So for a lot of ships, that's just call reinforcement. On Executrix, you're going to reduce the cooldown for that buff ability that gives turn meter. Because a lot of times specials start like not on cooldown, but some do. So it's going to reduce all cooldowns, and that's something that maybe endgame players aren't paying attention to. It's not just the call reinforcement, it's the ultimate, it's any other abilities. Especially, this is why it makes it especially potent on a Chimera team, because you get to that insta kill much sooner. Because this is usually a cooldown of 4, but it's actually just a cooldown of 3 when you have this combo in there. And do not throw any other faction. There's been multiple times where I was just thinking I would go against like Executor or something, and I'd bring in Ebon Hawk, because I was like, oh, I want a buff dispel, I want chaff to prevent target locks, but completely ruin the synergy. So you really got to be careful. So new players that are just learning how to use Chimera Fleet, that's something to keep in mind. So that's it for this episode of Surprise Mechanics, or Mechanics You Never Knew Existed. Leave a like if you did enjoy. Let me know if you learned something, and also give your suggestions. I really actually do need suggestions for these videos, because I like doing them, but sometimes it's easy for me to forget what people don't really know. So just judging on me, I might look at something and say, oh, well, that's obvious, of course that does that, but a lot of people are missing it, so I need help from you guys. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.